If you're not sure what to do, if you're not sure about doing a company thing, just go try it for a couple of years. What's the worst that can happen? In 2 years, you could work on a postdoc and get scooped in the last year and come away with nothing anyway.
Life as an early career researcher is rather uncertain. The conditions for most postdocs aren't really great, and the availability of professorships isn't increasing at the same rate as the number of PhDs entering the academic career path. We talk about this regularly. So it makes sense to seriously consider other career options, and we do talk about them ever now and then too. In this episode, I want to talk about the transition from postdoc to technology business founder. Recently, I learned that some podcast applications add advertisements to our podcast. Even if you are listening to this podcast on such an app, we do not receive any income from the company of your podcast app. We only receive support through Patreon, sales of our merchandise store, and direct donations. You can learn more about all the options of support on www.scienceforprogress.eu. We are very grateful for the support that we are already receiving and hope that you too will consider supporting us. My name is Dennis Eckmeyer, and you are listening to episode 39 of Science for Societal Progress.
My name's John Stowers. I'm originally from New Zealand. I studied a PhD in electrical engineering, and after that I moved from engineering into natural sciences and did a neuroscience postdoc. And after that first postdoc, I started, along with Max, my co-founder, LoopBio, and now I'm working in something between a startup and a small business in the natural sciences field.
Let's get to know John a little bit better. First, I was curious to know what brought John from New Zealand to Austria.
I was in New Zealand during these Christchurch earthquakes of 2011. That was the university I was at, and that was closed and severely damaged. I was in the last year of my PhD, and I thought, this is a good motivation to finish.
John had spent a year of his PhD in Switzerland, so he
started looking for jobs in Europe, and through a previous connection to my previous boss that I'd established through my PhD, I got a position in Austria and moved, let's say, during the last year of my PhD to finish it and move to Austria.
What did he do as a postdoc in neuroscience?
So my PhD work from the engineering side was something like biologically inspired flight control of drones. And in the process of that research, I came in contact with Andrew Straw.
Andrew Straw studies the role of the visual system in flight control in fruit flies. He is currently tenured professor at the University of Freiburg.
And I happened to email Andrew if he had anything available because I was looking to move away from engineering. And he said, yes, I'm moving to Vienna myself. Do you want to come and start in the lab? That was basically the switch from me from engineering to biology.
Because John was still not finished with his PhD when he joined Andrew Straw's lab, he began as a technician and did some engineering-related work necessary for the experiments in the new lab.
So that was building the setups there and kind of building the infrastructure for the lab, and I would say learning a bit more about the natural sciences and about neurobiology. But it was really a position at the start that was an engineering position in a neuroscience lab.
I did my PhD in a closely related field, so I was interested in what kind of technologies John implemented in the lab.
I would say the largest thing I worked on in the Straw Lab, which we published a few years ago now, was this freely flying virtual reality system for Drosophila. It was a cylindrical arena, so 1 meter diameter by 1 meter high, around the top of which there was 10 cameras. And inside the arena, there were numerous Drosophila. Onto the sides of the cylinder from the outside, it was projected using 3 projectors and several mirrors, a panoramic projection. And from those 2 building blocks, cameras to track the position in real time of a flying or moving individual, or in this case, a flying Drosophila, and real-time ability to project images on the outside of the cylinder. From the perspective of that animal, you could then create a virtual reality environment that could allow you to do behavioral experiments in a high throughput manner on those Drosophila in the cylinder, one at a time, of course. And after that, several other. The common theme was something like closed-loop, real-time experimental apparatus using cameras.
So let me explain. The fruit fly is flying within a cylinder that is a meter tall and a meter in diameter. On the walls of the cylinder, they project an environment. It's like a virtual environment. And then they studied how the fly would respond to certain movements of the environments in its flight.
We had this ability to control the position of the fly, like remote control the position of the fly.
You'll find a link to the paper and other resources in the show notes, which you can read on our website, www.scienceforprogress.eu. So John worked on this for a couple of years in total, first as a technician and then as a postdoc. And then he decided to leave the academic career path. I wanted to know why he made this decision.
Andrew's contract came to an end there, and so he was looking for the next step in the career ladder. And I thought it was either, do I take another postdoc or do I go with Andrew to Freiburg? I was sort of weighing up those two options. In the end, I think for other reasons perhaps, or just the totality of the benefits of other options were a bit more than what I thought a second postdoc would be. And so that took me down the LoopBio or the company route. I wouldn't say I left academia for the sake of leaving academia, or at least at that point, that wasn't really my thinking.
And this is when John decided to rather give it a shot as a founder of his own company.
I became aware quite quickly that the package or the work situation at the Institute of Molecular Pathology in Vienna was really fantastic, and it was a really well-paid, I would say, postdoc. And I thought, it became immediately aware that, wow, this is probably an outlier in the field already, because it was so well done and it was such a good match for what I was interested in. And I sort of started seeing, well, everything from this is certainly not a step up in enjoyment or a step up in other axes that I was cared about at that time. So it would be really a holding pattern. And my now wife was doing her PhD and sort of weighing up in moving away for a couple of year postdoc or staying here, probably switching to another postdoc in Vienna or switching to another kind of science or academic position in Vienna. That would also rather be a holding pattern for me. So I sort of started to think already, what's the next step plus one, and how did I feel about that one, and did that one make sense to me? And seeing that all the postdoc contracts were like 2 years, I was like, okay, all in 2 years' time, it's going to be as another bag of uncertainty, which I wasn't super motivated for.
So what is the idea behind LoopBio?
The two main products we sell are Motif, which is video recording, and a video recording platform for building closed loop and complicated behavioral assays around. So it takes care of the recording and compression of video from multiple single or multiple synchronized cameras and other data. So it's all in one data stream that's aligned, and you don't have to work out, well, this was my EEG and this was my video, when was the time base, and things like that. And then we also sell an image processing product called Loopy, which does tracking and behavioral quantification and other things like that. Again, I did do a lot of tracking in my my postdoc.
This kind of system is what you need if you want to quantify and analyze complex behavior and brain function of animals. The point is that LoopBio is developing a high-end technology that John and his co-founder understood would be very useful to researchers they knew.
In Andrew's lab, we were very, very advanced on the complexity and technology curve. And, you see, well, if you're here, 90% of the field is behind you in complexity and technology, and yet in 5 years' time, they might want to be where I am now. So if I just start to go into the biology field and supply technology that I think is the basal level infrastructure that is very important but very hard to get right to support them doing their experiments, I think that be enough of a good business basis.
And this technology isn't even at the complexity level at which he had been working before.
Most of our customers aren't actually doing closed loop experiments yet. And I think a lot of the technological and engineering challenges of the work in Andrew's lab was it all had to be real time. And so that's obviously a minority of biologists that want real time closed loop experiments. So rather, I think what I learned and what I took, at least theoretically, from that postdoc to LoopBio was, well, where in the complexity curve does the lab lie, and what is in fact the majority of the biologists doing with respect to their use of video in a recording and in an open loop kind of experimental paradigm.
John had been implementing setups for other laboratories in the institute, which to him was more of a spin-off kind of work.
And I just thought, well, I've done this thing for 5 different people, 5 different ways. While I was at the IMP, I might as well just take all that lesson and build the thing that I would build from scratch, and then I can try and provide that to many customers. Let's say the technological lineage of everything.
When LoopBio was newly founded, its products were still in its developmental phase. In such a situation, it certainly is hard to compete with other companies doing similar things. The market is small, so competition is a big factor.
There's a lot of companies in that space that just do the behavioral analysis, video processing, and assays for mice, basically, because it's the biggest industry. So we've always tried to do a little bit more, not only the top 3 model species, but we'll do the recording and image processing solutions for field biologists, and we will do a lot more. We have a lot of customers that do fish because that was some of our first customers. So I think we've always tried to be the unconventional animals and the complicated assays. And as we get more and more experience, and as we get more and more trust in our technology, and as we perhaps get more familiar with the market, we can move in the direction of these big 3 model species. But we've always tried to be the interesting kind of smaller company that does the difficult problems, so the long tail of customers, really.
And with this strategy, LoopBio doesn't simply avoid competition. By taking on customers with unusual requirements, they also get to find solutions for particularly hard problems, which is valuable experience for the development of a robust product. For example, they took on the challenge to make this high-tech capability of tracking the behavior of small animals available in the field.
This is for birds. This is with Professor Leo Fusani in Vienna, who does manakins, which is a tropical bird with a complicated courtship ritual. And he studies those in the field. So we have a system for him, and we have a number of other customers that have been using our systems in the field as well. So we kind of try to think more integrative, which is that it's not just software, it's kind of the whole package. So you get a portable PC or similar system, cameras, lenses, lighting. You can, in this case, the field one is obviously battery powered. You carry that in the backpack, you set it up. You can observe remotely, waiting for your animal to do the behavior you're interested in, record, etc. Take that back, upload that, and analyze that with the rest of our software. So I think we try and kind of do these challenging projects like this because it teaches us, if our stuff can work in this kind of situation, then it can work in the lab.
John didn't found his company alone. He had a partner.
So I met Max Hofbauer in the course of the work in the IMP. He was as a technician in a collaborating lab, and we first met in the context of fish virtual reality. So he was running those experiments, and we kind of got to know one another there. So he was a real biologist, let's say, who's started then, maybe perhaps like yourself, learned to program and then learned to really enjoy the technological side of it. And so he was very motivated to understand what's behind the curtain a little bit there, and also had a very good touch with animals and the kind of work ethic that you need for doing real live animal experiments repeatedly, regularly, and consistently. And so we got along quite well, and he sort of asked me, and I thought about it a bit, and I knew that we'd worked well together, and we thought, okay, cool, it sounds like a good idea. He knew what the VR stuff that I was doing was, and so we initially sort of started working together and started to build out what the idea for the company could be. And it's all gone relatively smoothly since then, or very smoothly, actually.
Did you need a biologist to do the testing? What does it look like if, as a private company, you need to test with
so
animals?
We can't obviously have animals to do animal experiments. So it was very, very hard at the start in the first few years, or in the first 2 years, because on the one hand, you're a startup and you kind of have to say yes to everything because you need to have money. But on the other hand, you can't say yes to everything because there are certain things you can't test, there are certain things you can't validate. And knowing this at the time, okay, if someone asks us to do apparatus XYZ on animal, ABC, then if we can't access those animals, I can't produce a trustworthy solution to the thing they're asking me to produce. So finding the kind of customers that we could work with in an iterative way to kind of work with them to develop the first versions of these technologies was very important for us. And we were very lucky to get some customers that helped us in this way at the start while we built up experience with animals, built up a database of videos and experience with biologists. And then after that, we can now now I'd say we have a feeling of what we need, and we have a library of videos to develop on, and we have a library of contacts that we can ask for, hey, if you have time, could you perhaps film this thing in this situation? And we could then use that for testing and validation.
So the company needed contacts within the community of researchers that were themselves interested enough to partake and invest resources in the development of their products.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I would say at the end of my postdoc, I published quite well, and I think I had a pretty good reputation in the field, in my particular corner of the field. And I think a lot of people were asking me, I see you're not employed at the moment, or I see you're starting this company. Could you help me build this thing? And at that point from them, I think it was very clear that it was that they knew they were the uncommon customer. So there was a little bit of an appreciation at the start that, well, this isn't a off-the-shelf thing. And so a lot of our first projects were certainly much more consulting, which would be consulting engineering. That was exactly the work I would have been doing in my postdoc. So you build the thing with them. And as we go forward in time, we kind of coalesce around the technology that everyone kind of asks for, and that became the products that we sell.
Up to now, we've been talking mostly about product development. Of course, I also wanted to know what else it entails to leave academia and start a company. Was it complicated?
Well, I guess that depends a lot on the country. We started it in Austria. Basically, we just Googled how to start a company in Austria. More or less, right?
Well, that's easy.
Yeah. I think, the key to doing something is to just start doing it. I mean, that was always my philosophy with engineering. Something like don't stress and agonize over finding the best way to do it. Just kind of recognize the half a dozen worst ways to do it and don't do those. So we kind of just started. We literally found a lawyer and an accountant and a notary and read the appropriate documents and started a company. Paid in, this depends on the country now, but we paid in the founding capital, got ourselves registered, and then that was it. I mean, then we had a hypothetical company entity on paper, and then we could start talking to people and start working in a contractual capacity with customers. So we just did it, I would say.
But the first years are always very difficult, right? Because you maybe don't have clients yet, and you're looking, and there's no permanent stream of financial support coming in. Yeah. How did you bridge this time?
I mean, with luck and hindsight, I guess I would say we don't have any investors. We don't have an enormous amount of money in the bank. We just started. We were very fortunate on day one or very early on to receive quite a big contract to do some custom engineering on some VR systems. And I'm very thankful to Professor Cousin in Constance for trusting us with the development of these systems. And so that kind of got the first bit of money that came into the bank. And then after that, it was really just calling people, emailing people that I'd perhaps interacted with that knew I was competent, saying, hi, I'm doing this now. Do you need me to build anything? Knocking on doors. So once we had like a few months of like noodle money in the bank, it was just sales. Really after then, it's just so careful with cash flow and how much, when you invoice things, when you buy the materials, when you pay the bills, trying to say yes to things that you knew didn't have a high material cost, trying to arrange payment terms with customers that knew that we were starting a business that could kind of pay things in parts and steps and iterations. So it was really carefully just finding people that were as compatible as possible with us and being really frugal for the first year. after the first year, we could get a little bit more choosy with customers. So it was not like we said yes to everything. We started to say yes to more similar things so that we could start to have more customers in parallel. But I think it's just really about taking the most amount of risk you can so that you aren't always doing something that isn't long-term beneficial. And I think that's what we learned at the start in terms of the customers that we took on.
So you are now fine. So you have a steady income, and there's always enough to do for you.
Exactly. Now we've managed to have a good reputation. I think we like to say now we're on our second degree of separation customers. So that's always good. It's not just people that you've known or people that have told someone. It's people that have told someone that have told someone about us, or that have found us through the internet or through conferences. So I think now we have a steady stream of new customers coming in and new approaches, and we have a good technology base. So a lot of the things that we sell now, or even the consulting and the customization we do, is really around things that we have a great amount of trust and experience in, and which means we can do more of those projects per year, and we can say yes to more interesting things. So we're in a good place right now, and I think I'm very happy with how it's gone. I think we're over 3 years now, so we're three and a bit years. So I think the second year and the third year was the hardest, or you expect the first year to be hard, right? Because the first year you have to say yes to everything. And then the second year, there's the bit of the lull, which is very stressful, right? Because then you are, the first reason for starting the company is kind of maybe gone away, and you now need to get these new people that if you've already emailed everyone in the first year, and the second year, you're like, oh goodness, what am I going to do now? So the second year is I think was much more stressful from us, because we had to take on more, surprisingly stressful. And then the third year it was more, well, now how much stress do we want to bring upon ourselves? How much more risk do we want to take? And now we're a little bit more stable. So I'm losing less hair these days, I think, going less grey.
Yeah, I was told that going freelance, for example, takes about 4 years until you're stable. Yeah. So this seems to kind of work out this way for you too.
Yeah, at least in Austria, many of our tax benefits run out after the first couple of years. So you don't really see your full exposure until after the second year anyway. Mm-hmm. You're in a bit of false sense of security in the first couple of years.
So how did you reach these second tier people? Did you ask your friends to maybe forward your emails, or did you were you mentioned maybe in papers, in the acknowledgements, or things like that?
I think it's for us, it's conferences. We kind of knew early on that once we'd exhausted our first contacts in the first year, that we got to meet people again. And so we started spending as much money as we could on conferences in the first 2 or 3 years. Stephen, even now still, but really being present all the time, talking to people, having nice demos, following up on approaches with answers that are specific to their question and their science. Really, conferences is a very important part of our marketing and our not just marketing, but our presence, our entire scientific life now, because we aren't actual scientists doing science. We are scientists consuming science and scientists and their experience at conferences. So it's a very, very important thing.
John actually met with my co-host Bart Gerten for a brief chat about the benefits of conferences. It's part of our episode 26, Conferences, What Are They Good For? The Patreon exclusive extended version of the episode was recently opened to everybody, by the way. So you can go and listen to it even if you are not supporting us on Patreon.
Really big events and really costly and really complicated things to go to, but they're, at least so far, we've found very, very, very useful. And yeah, that's the stressful thing in the third year, I would say, of the company, which is how much do you want to spend now on these sorts of activities? And the answer is, I think, as much as possible.
They also invested in showing up at the biggest neuroscience conferences.
Yeah, it's a great conference. It's one where we get to see a broad overview of many different research questions and meet a lot of interesting scientists there.
Okay, so what is the main lesson that you took from all of this? Did you learn something?
I would say I learned that a lot can happen in a couple of years, really. Like in the company side of things, everything can happen in 2 years or 3 years. And so I think in that sense, I learned that sometimes it feels like time goes pretty slowly in a PhD and a postdoc. I mean, you can go a couple of years and not a lot will change, but really in the last few years, everything has changed with respect to my life and my situation. So I've learned that, let's say outside of academia, things move fast. And I think that's the biggest lesson that I've taken from all of this company stuff.
Since I am also transitioning into an academia-adjacent private sector, I had some further questions. But a lot of people would say this is very bold. So that's what I heard a lot about. So what I did was to just stop everything for a year and then just do my science advocacy and nothing else, and maybe spread the word that I'm out there ready to do some freelance stuff. I'm really open about whatever. And a lot of people said that was very bold and that they would not dare to do something like that. So do you think that's that maybe academia is actually not more certain in your outlook as becoming an entrepreneur?
Yeah, well, it's funny when you put it like that. I mean, the null hypothesis for academia, I mean, everyone knows the funnel, right? Everyone knows the percentage of people that make it through to the next step. And so, I mean, it's kind of bold to believe that you will be in that small point of the funnel that gets to the next step, at least in my reading of it. I think a lot of people, if you say bold, I think they mean it's financially risky, which of course it is. And I think that's certainly what people can mean from it. But yeah, I mean, I guess if you're willing to live, boldly for a year or two, that's just, you have to do that. But in terms of the future success, I don't find it, like the long-term prognosis, I don't find it any more or less bold than thinking you would probably go through the academic funnel and come out the end successfully. So I think it's the choice. I probably wouldn't use bold to describe it. I would use at least the entrepreneurial path. I think it would just be something like, I don't even want to say not afraid. I just want to say like something like what's the worst that could happen kind of thing. I think that's always been my philosophy. I mean, it's hard to remember that when you're in a really stressful time, either in a postdoc or an entrepreneurial situation. But I mean, what's the worst that can happen really? It's not so bad.
Yeah. My impression was that it's more like, as long as you have the safe postdoc job, just stick with it. And I don't know, I got to the point where I was thinking, no, if I do yet another postdoc or yet another 5 years of postdoc, I'm 45, and then I want to switch into industry. That will be yet harder.
Yeah, that's true. I absolutely agree with that. I mean, I would say a lot of postdocs are just holding, a lot of first postdocs are holding patent PhDs, at least in my opinion. So you do the PhD and then you just do the postdoc because it's the natural thing afterwards. So, that defers a lot of the existential career decision kind of angst until after the postdoc, at which point, things are sometimes a bit more acute in terms of your age and, where you are in life. Maybe it's best to take a good career decision every now and then. I mean, I think I've read a few things and people, discussing their life history and their career history, and they say, try and think of your professional life as something like 3 or 4, 5 to 10 year long careers. If you already start with that in the back of your mind that you don't have to do the same thing for 30 years, then, you build into your mind, I'll do a couple of changes in there.
Do you think that your background in engineering has something to do? Maybe you have friends that went into industry early? Or
Yeah, certainly. I think that's my starting point is very different to the natural sciences people. It's always been very fluid in engineering between research and industry, and it's always been the default assumption is that you move from one to the other and back. And I know certainly the back case in the natural sciences is not really possible or not really valued, from industry back to academia. So I can understand the doors seem a lot more stressful in one way from in the natural sciences than they do in the engineering sciences. But yeah, I'm certainly biased in that way. I definitely acknowledge that.
Did John enjoy the ride, or was it mostly stressful?
No, I really, really enjoyed it. I think the things that made me stressed during my postdoc are not the same things that make me stressed on the entrepreneurship. And I think that's good, because a lot of the things that was very stressful in my postdoc, I now have complete control of as an entrepreneur. I've taken on new stresses. But that's really something that I wouldn't have valued as much having not been through it. So, as a postdoc, particularly one doing technical things, building technical things for other people, you kind of never, as an engineer, you never felt you could kind of finish it to the quality that you wanted to finish it, or you never felt that it was done. People were always asking for something else and changes, and this made me very stressed because as an engineer, I wanted to understand what the state of it was and be sure about it, and then be proud of it and give it to the next thing. Mm-hmm. And so that doesn't exist in the entrepreneurship model, because you get to decide when it's finished, and you get to work it to a level that you trust and think it's really valuable, and then you sell it to the customer, and the kind of deal is done. It's really satisfying to just regularly finish things. Mm-hmm. And that was a stress that I that does not reflect the same stress that I had in academia, where you always felt it's nothing's ever finished, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Also, I think the whole transaction, to use perhaps the wrong word, between someone asking you to do something for them and you doing it, is just a lot clearer in now being outside of academia or working with academics than it is when you are a technical person with lots of people that know you asking for things. Because in the latter case, it's your friends asking for stuff, and you do it, and you do it just enough, but not to a quality that you would like. And you always feel bad about it not being as good as you could have done. And then it's like loaning money to your friends a little bit, right? So there's always a little bit of you never quite feel 100% certain about it. Whereas at least in the academic industry case, if someone asks you for something, you give them what they asked for to a quality that you trust, and it's the transaction is certainly a little bit more closed. And that's again another thing that I value, because it gives me less stress. I like being my own technical boss, and I think Max and I share the responsibilities quite well. So he does a lot of the administrative and customer support and I would say leads and lead generation, and I do a lot of the technical management and strategy and things like that. And I think those are the parts of being your own boss that I really value. Like, strategy is really satisfying to do as your own boss, and all of the technical, is it finished kind of decision making is very good as my own boss. I feel like I can react to the world with more flexibility being an entrepreneur than I could be if I was in a lab that was working on this thing, and this is the thing they worked on.
And finally, LoopBio is looking to hire.
Yeah, so we're currently looking for kind of the bachelor or master's student that did a lot of experiments, loves doing animal work, has a good feeling for what the broad kinds of experiments people do are, but doesn't really want to do them anymore and would rather help people do them. And so we're looking for someone that would really do sales and like a research engineer, essentially, that comes up with demos and prototypes and helps them answer their scientific questions. So if you were always the one that liked building setups for people, or liked advising them on cool experiments to do, or how to measure particular widgets, then we're looking for that person. And just please send us a mail.
Check out the show notes for a link to the LoopBio website. After being hit by a natural disaster in New Zealand, John left his home country for a postdoc in Austria. He didn't just switch countries. He also switched from engineering to neuroscience. In his time in Vienna, John developed experimental setups far ahead of the curve in terms of complexity. As other laboratories kept asking for his help with their own setups, he realized there was a market for a certain subset of the technologies he used for his own research. When his advisor was about to leave Vienna, John faced the decision to either look for another postdoc position in Vienna, where his now wife was still working on her PhD, or follow his advisor to Freiburg in Germany. He did neither. Because the postdoc came with many uncertainties, and he didn't see postdoc opportunities that he considered a step up in his career, he decided to become an entrepreneur instead. After Googling how to found a company in Austria, John and his partner got themselves legal and financial advice and founded LoopBio. They used their professional network and the reputation John had gained by publishing an impactful paper to find early adopters. Those were laboratories in their field willing to invest resources in LoopBio in return for John and his partner to develop custom solutions for their high-end requirements. By focusing on exclusive customized systems for scientists in a narrow niche, LoopBio gathered experience and a reputation. Now, a bit over 3 years later, John is satisfied with the course the company is taking, and they are looking to widen their customer base by investing in promotion at the leading neuroscience conferences. On the personal side, John is very happy with his situation as an entrepreneur. He says it gives him the freedom to choose his battles and to develop the products the way he wants them to work, which is particularly satisfying. Of course, there is still a good amount of stress involved, but it's stress about different things. He urges early career researchers to realistically think about the uncertainties that lay ahead. Making clear career decisions every now and then is probably better than getting stuck in one career path for too long, because one is trying to avoid them.
Well, I hope you enjoyed my journey from academia to industry, and I hope it can be helpful for some of you that are thinking about doing such a journey. I would just say, just try it out and see what happens. And yeah, if anyone wants any other help or support, or wants to ask me any questions about the details, either strategically or Austria company or legal stuff or anything like that, just please send me a mail. And otherwise, come and talk to us at conferences, because we're always happy to talk to scientists.
Find the summary and links for more information in the show notes on www.scienceforprogress.eu. You can listen to the whole conversation with John Stowers on Patreon if you pledge to support me with $6 per month. At this point, I want to thank all of my patrons for their support. I'm deeply thankful. Would you like to suggest a topic to talk about in the near future? You can send me a message on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram @Sci4Progress. Direct messages are open. Or through email, info@scienceforprogress.eu. I thank you very much for listening. Have a good day. Bye-bye.